Today's news from Korea. The President's office announced on the 8th that President Yoon Suk-yeol will meet with U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris, who will visit Korea on the 29th. President Yoon will meet with Vice President Harris, who is scheduled to visit South Korea on the 29th, and exchange opinions on matters of mutual interest such as North Korea issue, economic security, major regional and international issues, as well as ways to strengthen Korea-US relations, the presidential office said. The presidential office also emphasized that the interview reflects the firm will of the two governments to strengthen the ROK-US alliance since the inauguration of the Yoon Suk-yeol government. The White House also announced on the 7th that Vice President Harris would visit South Korea and Japan from the 25th to the 29th. Vice President Harris plans to visit South Korea after attending the Director General of Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe scheduled for the 27th as a representative of the U.S. government. It is the first time Vice President Harris has visited South Korea since taking office in January last year. At the meeting between President Yoon and Vice President Harris, it is likely that the U.S. Inflation Reduction Act will be discussed, which includes the exclusion of imported electric vehicles, including those made in Korea, from subsidies. President Yoon is likely to ask Vice President Harris to promptly resolve the issue of discrimination against Korean electric vehicles. Although it is necessary to revise the law at the U.S. congressional level, it is predicted that President Yoon will demand that the U.S. government recognize the seriousness of this problem and make efforts to minimize damage to the Korean auto industry. Vice President Harris also serves as ex-president of the United States Senate. The government delegation visited the United States at the end of last month to convey Korea's concerns about IRAs to the United States government and proposed a joint consultation window between the ROK and U.S. ministries to discuss the issue. The North Korean issue is also expected to come to the table of dialogue. It is highly likely that South Korea and the U.S. will discuss a joint response plan to North Korea's 7th nuclear test. It is expected that there will also be an explanation of the Bold Initiative, a roadmap for the Yoon Suk-yeol administration toward North Korea. The visit of the U.S. Vice President to Korea is the first in 4 years and 6 months since Vice President Mike Pence's visit to Korea in the wake of the Pyeongchang Winter Olympics in February 2018 during the Moon Jae-in administration. During this visit, Vice President Harris is expected to prevent President Yoon and meet with Prime Minister Han Deok-soo. At an elementary school located in Donggu, Gwangju, the total number of students decreased by 1 from 33 in 2020 to 32 this year. However, the number of teachers increased by 3 more, from 12 to 15 in the same year. The budget also increased by 11% from 283 million won to 314 million won in the same year. In Gwangju, 14 schools have been closed so far. There are 8 schools in Gwangju with fewer than 60 students, and considering the decrease in the school-age population, closures are expected to increase further. In addition to Seoul, the number of students in the 7 major metropolitan cities across the country is also rapidly decreasing, but rather, the number of teachers increases and the budget increases, resulting in an imbalance. Although the number of students in Daegu, Incheon, Daejeon, and Ulsan has declined sharply over the past decade, the number of teachers has increased. In Seoul and Busan, the number of students fell by 25% and 28%, respectively, during the same period, but the number of teachers decreased only by 5% and 6%. This phenomenon is due to the structure in which the number of teachers with guaranteed retirement age cannot be drastically reduced, although schools in the old city center are on the verge of closing due to a decrease in the number of students. While the number of students is dropping sharply, the school district budget is increasing. As education subsidies have a budget structure in which 20.79% of the national tax is compulsory, education subsidies are also increasing as the economy grows and tax revenues increase. According to the settlement announcement of Local Education Finance Alert, Seoul recorded 1.281.1 trillion won in 2020, an increase of 3.35 trillion won from 2014, and Busan was 4.908.7 trillion won in 2020, an increase of 1.273.3 trillion won compared to 2014. It is pointed out that unnecessary maintenance budgets such as facility operation costs and renovation/repair costs for closed or consolidated schools are being spent due to the increase in the amount of education subsidies allocated. The future is a bigger problem. This is because the school-age population is decreasing year by year due to the low fertility. In a recent report, the Korea Economic Research Institute predicted that the number of students from 5.46 million in 2020 will drop sharply to 4.02 million in 2040 and 3.02 million in 2060. Despite this decrease in the number of students who are consumers of education, the number of educational grants paid to education offices across the country is increasing year by year. Education grants are expected to increase from 59.6 trillion won last year to 64.9 trillion won this year, 77 trillion won in 2026, and 89.2 trillion won in 2030. The average insurance premium for electric vehicles in Korea is close to 1 million won. This is because the parts are expensive, the repair cost is higher, and the accident rate is higher. A study also found that the accident rate of high-end SUV electric vehicles was higher among electric vehicles. According to the Financial Supervisory Service on the 9th, the average premium for electric vehicles in Korea was 943,000 won as of last year, 181,000 won higher than that of internal combustion engine cars. Electric vehicles are more expensive to repair key parts such as batteries. The average repair cost of electric vehicles last year was 2.45 million won, which is higher than that of non-electric vehicles. The high accident rate is also the reason for the increase in insurance premiums. According to the Financial Supervisory Service, the accident rate of electric vehicles last year was 18.1%, 2.1 percentage points higher than that of non-electric vehicles. One of the reasons for the high accident rate of electric vehicles is the much longer mileage per year. According to the Financial Supervisory Service, the proportion of long-distance drivers with an annual mileage of more than 15,000 kilometers was 24.2% for electric vehicles and 10.3% for non-electric vehicles as of last year. Electric vehicles are more expensive, but they cost less fuel, making them economically advantageous to those who drive frequently. As EV drivers spend relatively more time on the road than non-electric vehicles, the accident rate also increases. Some studies have also found that electric vehicles that are quieter and less noisy are more likely to cause pedestrians and accidents. According to the European Transport Institute's survey of traffic accident data in Norway between 2011 and 2018, the proportion of accidents involving pedestrians or cyclists with electric vehicles was greater than that of internal combustion locomotives. Pedestrian accidents accounted for 10.4% and bicycle accidents accounted for 9.9% of all accidents involving internal combustion locomotives. On the other hand, electric vehicles accounted for 17.8% of pedestrian accidents and 13.7% of bicycle accidents. Hyundai Motors sold 454 electric vehicles in Indonesia in the second quarter, recording an overwhelming market share of 90%. Although the number of units sold is not large, it is evaluated that it has succeeded in preoccupying the market considering that the electric vehicle market was opened for the first time this year. The secret lies in building a finished car plant near Jakarta, Indonesia's capital, in March and starting to produce the first electric car, the Ioniq 5, locally. According to the industry on the 8th, as the domestic market shrinks due to a decrease in the domestic population, more companies are setting up production bases abroad. This is because it is advantageous to penetrate the market by directly entering an area with a large population and increasing demand to establish a regional value chain. Another trend that appears in the industrial field in an era of population decline is unmannedness. This is to prepare for a job shortage due to a decrease in the working age population. Samsung Electronics Pyeongtaek campus, Gyeonggi-do, which has built a 100% automated process, has only 3 to 5 employees managing the 518M line. The population cliff is also changing consumption trends. It is the trend of advanced. Although the number of children is decreasing due to the low birth rate, the luxury children's clothing market is rather booming. South Korea already has 1 smartphone for every population and 1 car for every 2 people. Considering that the population has entered a declining trend, the market for consumer goods such as smartphones and automobiles will no longer grow, experts predict. In fact, the number of units sold in Korea by Hyundai Kia Motors this year is similar to that of 2002, 20 years ago. The overseas market is definitely different. It is showing steady growth mainly in countries with large populations or low car ownership rates. Hyundai Kia Motors overseas sales have quadrupled in 20 years from about 1.51 million units in 2002 to 6.18 million units this year. Considering the strengthening trade barriers in labor costs and logistics costs, companies are judging that it is better to build a local supply chain by directly entering a region with high demand rather than exporting it domestically. According to industry sources on the 8th, the proportion of Hyundai Kia Motors domestic production fell below 40% for the first time to 39% last year. The proportion of domestic production, which reached 96% in 2001, was 49% in 2012, the first reverse to overseas production, and even fell below the 40% level last year. This means that overseas production has increased. It directly entered countries with a population of 100 to 300 million, such as the United States, Brazil, and Russia, and established production bases. Following the construction of a plant in Indonesia, the world's 4th largest population, in March, the electric car plant is scheduled to be completed in Georgia, the US, in 2025. Samsung Electronics is also increasing the proportion of local production to increase its influence in the global smartphone market. The smartphone factories in Vietnam's Ba Ninh and Thanh Nguyen provinces produce more than 50% of the 300 million smartphones Samsung Electronics produces a year. It is the largest production base ahead of the Gumi plant in Gyeongsangbuk-do. Smartphones manufactured in Vietnam factories are sold worldwide, mainly in Southeast Asian countries. The food industry, which was considered a domestic industry, is also significantly increasing the proportion of overseas business. As the main consumer base of processed foods such as confectionery, ramen, and frozen products is rapidly shrinking, it is a sense of crisis that it may be difficult to survive only on domestic demand. CJ Chiljedang has been operating the Vietnam Kizuna factory since February. Vietnam is a young country with a population of 100 million and an average age of only 32.5 years. The Kizuna factory produces global strategic products such as bibigo dumplings and hetbahn and exports them to the world. Orion has already established an overseas production system. It is expanding its local market by building factories in China, India, and Russia. The food industry is also targeting the North American market one after another. Nongshim built a second plant in Los Angeles, USA in April. The goal is to raise the proportion of overseas ramen sales from 30% to 50% by 2025. After Tesla caused a gust, the electric car wind, which became stronger due to a typhoon and silenced the hybrid wind, is starting to take a hit due to charging inconvenience, increased electricity rates, and reduced subsidies. Electric vehicles are attractive as a second car, but as a first car, it is being pointed out that 2% is insufficient. At the same time, hybrid cars, which handed over the leadership of eco-friendly vehicles to electric vehicles, are emerging as an alternative. This is because it can play the role of the most realistic eco-friendly car in the current situation. Hybrid cars can serve as a first car faithfully because they save on fuel costs and do not have to rely on a charging system. The growth of hybrid cars can be understood by looking at the new car registration status by fuel used in the first half of this year by the Ministry of Land, Infrastructure, and Transport. The number of gasoline vehicles registered this year was 42,298, down 12.6% from the same period last year. Diesel vehicles decreased 29.8% to 174,858 units and LPG vehicles decreased 32.7% to 37,389 units, respectively. On the other hand, electric vehicles sold 68,996 units, an increase of 75.6% from the same period last year. Hybrid cars were 105,749 units, an increase of 22.4% from the same period last year. Hybrid cars were sold more than electric cars. Together with Toyota, Honda enjoyed the benefits of hybrid cars. Honda, which suffered until 2020 due to the Japanese car boycott triggered by the provocation of the Abe government in 2019, survived by making hybrid cars its main focus last year. Last year, 4,355 units were sold, up 42.5% from the previous year. The Honda Accord Hybrid sold 1,510 units more than the previous year. The number of Honda Accord gasoline models decreased from 847 units in 2020 to 625 units last year. The imported car market experienced a decrease in sales in the first half of this year due to production setbacks caused by a shortage of semiconductors for vehicles and problems with supply of parts. The same goes for Honda. Instead, it outperformed other brands. The total number of imported cars sold decreased by 11.3% compared to the same period last year. Honda only saw a 5% decline. The Honda Accord Hybrid sold 478 units. Only 43 units fewer than 521 units in the same period last year. The Honda Accord Hybrid has also increased the value of used cars. This is the result of Enka.com's 2019 model imported used car market price calculation. Imported used cars showed a weak trend in August, but the Honda Accord Hybrid rose by 0.55%. On the other hand, the Mercedes E-Class fell 1.44%, the BMW 3 Series fell 1.32%, and the Audi A6 fell 2.08%. The Volkswagen Tiguan fell 0.99% and the Volvo XC60 fell 1.63%, respectively. The secret of the popularity of the Honda Accord Hybrid lies in its cost-effectiveness beyond price, performance or quality. It is because of the advantages of hybrid cars such as excellent fuel efficiency, excellent durability, and a price that can compete with domestic models. The originator of hybrid cars is Toyota. In 1997, the world's first mass-produced hybrid car, the Prius, was released and led the market. Honda, a latecomer, also spurred the development of hybrid car technology. Honda has developed a hybrid car technology similar to Toyota but with a different sensibility. Toyota hybrid cars tend to be gasoline cars. On the other hand, Honda hybrid cars tend to be electric vehicles. The engine only helps the motor. In addition, the Honda Accord is famous for its durability and low breakdown. This means less rot inside. The core of Honda's hybrid car is artificial intelligence driving mode selection technology. It is characterized by combining a high-efficiency system that utilizes the power of the motor to the fullest rather than the engine. It means that the motor is the main character and the engine is used as a system that supports the motor. Flexible and agile acceleration provides not only fuel economy but also powerful driving performance. Honda independently developed the motor system, which is the core technology of the hybrid car. It exhibits instantaneous reaction speed, toughness, and flexibility that cannot be expected from an engine alone. The drive mode consists of electric, sport and eco mode. When the electric vehicle mode is selected, it moves quietly like an electric car at speeds of 40 to 50 km per hour. I don't even use oil. When the speed exceeds 50 km per hour, the engine supports the motor. The engine does not go to main. It plays an auxiliary role in supplying electricity to the motor. The engine uses power only when the speed exceeds 100 km per hour. Switching to sport mode makes the steering wheel heavier and the pedals more responsive. The hit and run movement is slower than that of a gasoline sedan. If it is elastic, it runs at a level that is not stuffy. The Accord hybrid is closer to the electric car trend. It is different from the Camry hybrid, which has a gasoline sedan tendency. The fuel consumption measured after driving about 70 km mainly on automobile-only roads and national roads was 21 km per liter. Although I used about a quarter of the sport mode, the actual fuel efficiency was better than the compound fuel economy. The price of the Accord hybrid is 46.5 million won, similar to that of Hyundai Motors Grandeur. The Accord hybrid is an eco-friendly car that does not have charging stress unlike an electric car that can turn the Chuseok hometown road into a hard road due to a lack of charging system above all else. After U.S. House of Representatives Speaker Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan on the 2nd of last month, China protested by conducting large-scale military exercises, but foreign politicians' visits to Taiwan are becoming more frequent. After Pelosi's visit to Taiwan, 21 U.S., Japanese and French lawmakers and 2 U.S. governors visited Taiwan by the 8th. Next month, 20 Japanese lawmakers are expected to visit Taiwan. As China increases its pressure on Taiwan, Taiwan's presence in the international community is increasing. According to the Taiwan Central News Agency, Taiwanese President Tsai Ing-wen met with 8 U.S. House of Representatives who arrived in Taiwan the day before on the 8th. The delegation, led by Rep. Stephanie Murphy, who serves as the Vice Chair of the Intelligence and Special Warfare Subcommittee of the House of Representatives Military Committee, is the largest ever U.S. House of Representatives delegation to visit Taiwan. According to Taiwan's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, a total of 28 U.S. Senators and House of Representatives have visited Taiwan this year. Of these, 14 visited Taiwan after Pelosi's visit. A visiting group of French senators led by Cyril Pellebat, Vice Chairman of the European Commission of the French Senate, also visited Taiwan for 6 days and 5 nights on the 7th and met with Taiwanese Legislative Council President Yu Shikin and Vice President Rai Tsing on the 8th. China, which has opposed other countries' exchanges with Taiwan in accordance with the One China principle, has strongly opposed foreign politicians' visits to Taiwan as unauthorized visits. However, as China protests, their visit to Taiwan has become big news. The Taiwanese government emphasized China's military threat while focusing on ceremonies, including sending Tian Zhongguang, Deputy Foreign Affairs Secretary, to the airport when the U.S. House of Representatives delegation arrived in Taiwan on the 7th. It also promotes the importance of Taiwan as a state-of-the-art semiconductor manufacturing facility. With Pelosi's visit as an opportunity, the Taiwanese government is also accelerating the signing of the 21st Century Trade Initiative with the United States, which is the previous stage of the Free Trade Agreement. It is also strengthening its defense training against Chinese military provocations. The Taiwanese military invited CNN, as well as 2 Indian broadcasters, to a military exercise conducted on the 6th. The Taiwanese media gave the meaning, this is the first time that an Indian broadcast media has covered Taiwan's military training scene, suggesting that they will actively utilize India, which is a competitor to China, in the future. Foreign politicians' visits to Taiwan are expected to continue. According to the Taiwan Central News Agency, 20 members of the Japan-Taiwan Parliamentary Meeting, a Japanese parliamentary group, will visit Taiwan from the 8th to the 10th of next month. Foreign media such as Reuters and Bloomberg reported on the 7th that the U.S. government halted the acquisition of parts of the F-35 stealth fighter manufactured by Lockheed Martin after it was found that Chinese raw materials were used. The turbo machine of the F-35 engine connects the auxiliary power supply and the air circulator to supply power for ground maintenance work, starting the main engine, and using emergency power. Current U.S. law and Department of Defense procurement regulations prohibit the use of special metals or alloys produced by countries such as China, Iran, North Korea, and Russia. Honeywell, a manufacturer of lubricant pumps, notified Lockheed Martin and the U.S. Department of Defense last month after finding out that the parts were supplied by a subcontractor from China. The U.S. Department of Defense plans to replace it with other parts made of raw materials that do not violate relevant laws or regulations. During the Chuseok holiday, hacking attacks such as text scams disguised as courier deliveries are expected to increase, and the security industry emergency lights have been turned on. In particular, hackers targeting the elderly who are not accustomed to using smartphones are expected to continue their attacks taking advantage of the holidays when family exchanges are active. The security industry emphasized observing basic security rules, such as being careful about clicking URLs in text messages. According to the security industry and major national agencies on the 9th, cyber attacks targeting the elderly are expected to increase during the holidays. According to the police, there have been a total of 1,517,705 reports and blocks of smishing over the past 3 years, of which 42.2% occurred during the holidays. In particular, last year, it accounted for more than half with 50.4%. Smishing is a compound word of text message and phishing. It refers to a hacking technique that steals users' personal information by sending a text message containing an app installation file disguised as a trusted person or company to induce a user to install a malicious app or make a phone call. It is the delivery impersonation type that accounts for 94.7% of smishing attacks. Since then, there have been cases that have been disguised as public services, such as impersonating public institutions, making reservations for corona vaccinations, scheduling regular health checkups, and inquiring about fines for traffic violations. Recently, hacking attacks impersonating government agencies in the name of applying for disaster aid are increasing, and smishing types that induce the installation of malicious apps to steal personal financial information are also appearing. During the holidays, when there are many interactions with family members, you should be especially careful about smishing attacks that impersonate family members or acquaintances. This is because the number of attacks that demand money or personal information and financial transaction information is increasing, saying that it is an urgent situation for victims, such as cell phone breakdown, loss of credit card, and settlement money from an accident on the way home. According to the security industry, cases of distributing ransomware by creating fake sites using famous trot singers and song names that older people enjoy listening to, and attacks using malicious URLs in the YouTube description were also found. The security industry has issued a warning by announcing security measures to prevent the surge in cyber attacks during the holidays. Security companies such as InGilBang and InGilBang Corporation recently announced security measures in preparation for the Chuseok holiday. Prohibition of installation through the application installation file delivered by text message or messenger, making sure to check directly by phone even if you receive an emergency request from a family member such as a child through a message, and download internet content through the official route. InGilBang emphasized that normal financial services never require app installation by text message or phone call, and emphasized the need to pay attention to financial app installation. Recently, there has been an increasing number of people impersonating their children to purchase cultural gift certificates and send them serial numbers or to show a photo of their ID. Since the app installed by clicking the link in the unclear text is most likely a malicious app, InGilBang Corporation recommends manually deleting the app and installing a mobile-only antivirus. In addition, since there is a possibility of secondary financial damage due to abuse of personal information used in mobile financial services, it is recommended that existing public certificates and security cards be discarded and reissued. In addition, as the number of people staying at home during the holidays increases due to the spread of Corona-19, attacks using malicious content disguised as popular movies or games are increasing. The company recommends paying attention to security when downloading content through file sharing programs, WebHard, etc., rather than the official channel that provides the content. The Gyeongbokgung fashion show of Gucci, a global luxury brand that was on the verge of bankruptcy, will be held on November 1 as originally scheduled. The Gyeongbokgung fashion show of Italian luxury brand Gucci, which was cancelled due to the controversy over the hanbok photo shoot at the Blue House, will be held as scheduled. The Cultural Heritage Administration, which announced the cancellation of the event last month, reversed its position after 10 days. Gucci announced on the 8th that it will present a fashion show for the Gucci Cosmogony collection at Gyeongbokgung Palace on November 1. A Gucci official explained, this fashion show held at Gyeongbokgung Palace, one of the most symbolic and historical places in Seoul, shows Gucci's respect for the beauty of Korean cultural heritage. He added that Gyeongbokgung Palace, the royal palace of the Joseon dynasty, founded in 1395, is the perfect place to introduce the Gucci Cosmogony collection inspired by astronomy, as it is a place where world-class astronomical research has been conducted, including the Royal Observatory in the 1400s. We are meeting the conditions suggested by the Cultural Heritage Committee through close consultation with the Cultural Heritage Administration, he said. Earlier, Gucci invited about 500 people including diplomats, business figures, and celebrities to submit an application to use the Gyeongbokgung Jeongeon as a stage for a fashion show. In response, the Cultural Heritage Committee, an advisory body, accepted the application with conditions such as reinforce the value of the historical and cultural heritage of Gyeongbokgung with advice from relevant experts and ensure that the historical facts are verified. However, the Cultural Heritage Administration abruptly cancelled the event. At that time, an official from the Cultural Heritage Administration mentioned the controversy over the Blue House pictorial and said that various effects are expected, but in the current situation, it is not easy and it is very burdensome. Afterwards, the Cultural Heritage Administration announced that it had decided to cancel the Gucci fashion show at Gyeongbokgung Palace. However, the Cultural Heritage Administration changed its position to review the Gyeongbokgung Gucci fashion show earlier this month. The reason is that the atmosphere has changed as the Cultural Heritage Committee has already approved it, and after the fashion show related content is known, the opinion that Korea's cultural heritage can be made known to the world has changed. In this process, it is revealed that the Cultural Heritage Administration does not have a clear standard for the use of cultural assets following the Blue House pictorial. Former Blue House Protocol Secretary Tak Hyun-min criticized the opening without justification and plan, saying that the problem was that there was no clear and specific plan on how to use the Blue House when the controversy over the Blue House pictorial arose. Attorney Jang Young-ha, who raised the gangster involvement of Lee Jae-myung, the leader of the Democratic Party of Korea in the last presidential election, was dismissed from prosecution by the prosecution. Instead, Park Chul-min, a gangster who first raised the allegation of giving 2 billion won to party leader Lee Jae-myung, was handed over to trial. In the case of Jang, since there was no reason not to believe Park's words, the report was dismissed as acquittal. On the 8th, the Seoul Central District Prosecutor's Office of Public Investigation II dismissed attorney Jang, who was investigated for publicly false information under the Public Official Election Act. Lawyer Jang is the legal representative of Mr. Park, an activist of the International Mafia, a gang active in Songnam, Gyeonggi-do. Based on Mr. Park's words during the presidential election in October last year, Lawyer Jang delivered the story to Rep. Kim Yong-pan of People's Strength that party chairman Lee Jae-myung received about 2 billion won in terms of giving business preferential treatment to international mafia aides while serving as mayor of Songnam. Rep. Kim also disclosed photos of a bundle of cash that he had received from Lawyer Jang at the Gyeonggi State Audit Office, but these materials were later found to be unrelated to the allegations. The Democratic Party filed a complaint with the prosecution on charges of violating the Public Official Election Act, claiming that Park and Jang made false statements to prevent the election of party leader Lee Jae-myung. Prosecutors, however, dismissed the charges as they believed that Jang's words were true and reported these allegations. The result of the prosecution's investigation is that there is insufficient evidence to say that Lawyer Jang recognized the falsehood of the allegation. On the other hand, the Suwon District Prosecutor's Office's Public Investigation Department charged with violating the Election Act, considering that Park, who was the first to raise the allegation, said that it was false. In October of last year, then Democratic Party floor leader Yoon Ho-young claimed at a government audit countermeasures meeting that Park, who claimed that party leader Lee Jae-myung received 2 billion won from a gangster, was the son of a member of the People's Power. It was found that the person the former floor leader Yoon was referring to was actually a member of the United Future Party last year. Lee Jae-myung, chairman of the Democratic Party of Korea, who indicted the prosecution on the 8th for false information under the Public Official Election Act, made two major statements in the past. One is the remarks in a broadcast interview in December last year, in which party chairman Lee Jae-myung said he did not know about Kim Moon-ki, former head of Songnam Urban Development Corporation, who died suddenly while in charge of the Daejangdong Development Project, even while serving as Songnam mayor. The other is related to the Baekhyindong development suspicion that Songnam City gave preferential treatment of 300 billion won to private contractors through change of use. It was a response to the effect that the change was made. In response to the remarks by party leader Lee Jae-myung that he did not know Kim Moon-gi, the Seoul Central District Prosecutor's Office determined that the remarks of party leader Lee Jae-myung were false through analysis of confiscated items and testimonies of those involved. In the past, the Supreme Court found that the denial of party chairman Lee Jae-myung's denial of nothing like that at a TV debate during the 2018 local elections, saying there was no such thing at a TV debate when the suspicion of forcing his brother into a mental hospital was raised, and was acquitted of the charge of publicizing false facts. Has been confirmed. Prosecutors are said to have been conscious of this and focused on proving the intentionality of party leader Lee Jae-myung. Regarding Lee Jae-myung's remarks regarding the development of Baekhyindong, the Songnam branch judges that Lee Jae-myung's remarks are not true based on the audit results of the Board of Audit and Inspection. According to the audit results of the Baekhyindong Development Project by the Board of Audit and Inspection, there was a request for cooperation from the Ministry of Land, Infrastructure and Transport at the time, but there was no coercion or intimidation. Party leader Lee Jae-myung is also being investigated by the prosecution for allegations other than the charges of violating the election law, which were indicted on the same day. In particular, in relation to the deletion of the excess profit redemption clause in the Daejangdong clearing project, the prosecution is looking for the involvement of party leader Lee Jae-myung, then mayor of Songnam. He is also in the process of investigating the allegations of S Group's unpaid lawyer and Songnam FC sponsorship. For this reason, some are talking about the possibility of additional prosecution against party leader Lee Jae-myung. Meanwhile, the prosecution said, "We will continue to investigate the case in which the Democratic Party filed a complaint against Deutsche Motors and President Yoon Suk-yeol on allegations of declaring false information related to property reporting, considering that the statute of limitations has been suspended. The president has the privilege of impeachment during his tenure, except for civil war or foreign exchange charges." On the 8th, the prosecution sees two main charges against Lee Jae-myung, the leader of the Democratic Party of Korea, for publicly disinforming the 20th presidential election. The Seoul Central District Prosecutor's Office judged that it was a false fact that party leader Lee Jae-myung said in a broadcast interview in December of last year that he did not know Kim Moon-ki, the former head of Songnam Urban Development Corporation during his time as Songnam mayor, and indicted without detention. The Songnam branch of the Suwon District Prosecutor's Office also submitted to trial, saying that the remarks of the party's leader Jae Myung Lee in October last year that the Ministry of Land, Infrastructure and Transport threatened to take issue with the negligence of duties in relation to the change of use of the Baekhyendong business site were false. As a result of analyzing the remains of the deceased former Minister Kim and the statements of those involved, the prosecution concluded that the remarks by party chairman Lee Jae Myung that he did not know Kim during his tenure as mayor of Songnam were false. In light of the fact that Lee Jae Myung's number was stored on Kim's cell phone as Lee Jae Myung's lawyer since June 2009, and Lee Jae Myung received several face-to-face reports from Kim about the Daejeongdong development project while serving as mayor of Songnam, Lee Jae Myung the party leader's remarks were intentionally false. Prosecutors said that the suspicion of the development of Daejeongdong was a hot issue at the time, and that it became more controversial after the death of Kim. Prosecutors also indicted party leader Lee Jae Myung without detention, considering the remarks about the Ministry of Land, Infrastructure and Transport threat related to the Baekhyendong development project as false. Prosecutors saw that the Ministry of Land, Infrastructure and Transport was merely a cooperative measure to sell the site to the private sector, based on the official reply that the Ministry of Land, Infrastructure and Transport replied that it is a matter for the local government to decide regarding the change of use of the site for the Korea Food Research Institute in Baekhyendong. After the development of Daejeongdong and the development of Baekhyendong were reported one after another, it was believed that party leader Lee Jae Myung blamed the Ministry of Land, Infrastructure and Transport. Party leader Lee Jae Myung denies the allegations applied by the prosecution. Whether his remarks are true or intentional will be decided in court. If a fine of 1 million won or more is confirmed, party leader Lee Jae Myung will be deprived of his right to be elected for the next 5 years. He may be stripped of up to a parliamentary seat under Section 266 of the Public Official Election Act. On the other hand, if an acquittal is declared, it is highly likely that the prosecution's unreasonable indictment controversy will arise. The Public Official Election Act stipulates that in case of violation of the Election Act, sentence within 6 months for the first trial and within 3 months for the second and third trial. However, depending on the case, the final judgment may be delayed for more than 1 year. Ms. B, a key figure in the case of the suspicion of misappropriation of corporate cards in Gyeonggi-do, was handed over to trial. The Suwon District Prosecutor's Office of Public Investigation indicted Ms. B without detention on the 8th for violating the Public Official Election Act. However, they plan to continue investigating Kim Hye-kyung, wife of Democratic Party leader Lee Jae Myung, who was implicated in the allegation. If one person is first prosecuted as a co-authoritative criminal, the statute of limitations of prosecution will be suspended until the sentence is finalized. Therefore, the prosecution judged that an additional investigation into his wife Kim was necessary, and first referred Ms. B to the trial for the charge of publicizing false facts. Ms. B denied that the allegations of misuse of Gyeonggi-do corporate cards that surfaced during the last presidential election were not true. In response, civic groups, etc. accused Mr. B of false information, saying that she was telling lies. B and his wife Kim are also charged with breach of trust. From July 2018 to September 2021, when party chairman Lee Jae Myung was serving as governor of Gyeonggi province, it is known that Ms. B personally used a Gyeonggi corporate card worth about 20 million won for food, ingredients, and drug prescriptions. He is also suspected of mobilizing government officials from Gyeonggi-do to run his wife Kim's errands. Her wife, Kim, is accused of providing meals worth 100,000 won in total to 3 Democratic Party-related officials, her drivers, and lawyers at a restaurant in Seoul on August 2, 2021. In addition, his wife Kim is also accused of acknowledging that Ms. B used her Gyeonggi-do corporate card for private use, such as food, ingredients, and drug prescriptions. The Public Official Election Act stipulates that no donations to constituency residents and persons or organizations related to constituency residents are allowed, even for candidates, prospective candidates, and their spouses. For this reason, suspicions have been raised that Ms. B was hired as a special honest executive secretary for the convenience of his wife Kim, who worked as a grade 5 equivalent in the Gyeonggi General Affairs Division at the time when party leader Lee Jae Myung was governor of Gyeonggi province. The prosecution plans to continue the investigation into the alleged breach of trust between his wife Kim and Ms. B, and will honor the prosecution later. The charge has nothing to do with the statute of limitations under the Election Act. After receiving the case from the police on August 31, the prosecution conducted a speedy investigation. Currently, while focusing on finding the link between his wife Kim and Mr. B for the private use of corporate cards, we are closely examining whether there was any direct instruction from Mrs. Kim. In addition, it is also planned to determine whether or not Kim acknowledged the 20 million won in the Gyeonggi corporate card, which is known to have been used by Ms. B. Meanwhile, the Gyeonggi Nambu Police Agency's Anti-Corruption and Economic Crime Investigation Team is investigating 2 people, including a civil servant A from the General Affairs Division of the Gyeonggi Provincial Office, on charges of aiding and abetting work breaches. Person A is known to be the person who handled the receipts of Ms. B in charge of expenditure-related work at the General Affairs Department in Gyeonggi-do. He is also accused of neglecting the task of directing and supervising the execution of the current corporate card of Ms. B. Another person arrested was reported to be the head of the protocol team. It has only been 4 months since the Yoon Suk-yeol government was launched, but the political arena has already become a battlefield. In Udo, a brawl is taking place between the ruling and opposition parties in Udo due to the prosecution and police investigations against Democratic Party leader Lee Jae-myung, the opposition party's accusation against President Yoon Suk-yeol, and the proposal of the special prosecutor Kim Kun-hee. In this situation, those in their 20s and 30s, who are celebrating Chuseok, earnestly asked the politicians to take care of the people's livelihood and cooperation. They appealed to stop the strife and set the crazy house prices and crazy prices that bind them. In particular, the demands of those in their 20s and 30s for cooperation were quite strong. Many people in their 20s and 30s expected that the power of the people would rise as the topic of this Chuseok dinner table. There were many people in their 20s and 30s who expected that the prosecutor's office's investigation of party representative Lee Jae-myung and the Special Prosecutor's Office Act, which have emerged as the core of the political struggle between the ruling and opposition parties, will also come into use during the Chuseok holiday. However, there were also quite a few cynical responses saying that they would not discuss politics at all during the Chuseok holiday. Those in their 20s and 30s scored poorly on both the Yoon Suk-yeol government and the Democratic Party, which was inaugurated 4 months ago. When asked to evaluate on a scale of 10, 50 respondents gave the Yoon Suk-passionate government an average score of 2.8. The average score the Democrats received from 50 people was only 3.0 out of 10. The best thing the Yoon Suk-yeol government did best was doorstepping, which was a question and answer question on the way to work with reporters, and the worst thing was the personnel issue. The loan offensive was selected as the thing that the Democratic Party did the best, and Lee Jae-myung's legal risk cover was selected as the worst. Songjiang Motors plant has also been revived thanks to the new car Taurus, which recently surpassed the contract volume of 60,000 units within 2 months of its launch. The production line at the Pyeongtaek plant was initially operated in 2 shifts. However, the 2-shift work was suspended in July last year due to business setbacks and poor vehicle sales. Circular unpaid leave of employees has also begun. In June of this year, while renegotiating whether to extend the unpaid leave, the new car Taurus succeeded in sales, recording the highest number of pre-orders for Songjiang Motors, 12,000 units, within 1 day of a pre-contract. Thanks to that, in July of this year, 2 consecutive weekly shifts were resumed. It took 1 month at a time without a break from work. As factory uptime increases, so do the pockets of workers. Songjiang Motors executives and employees met on this day said that the most difficult time was when they went on unpaid leave in July of last year. M&A attempts to find a new owner have been unsuccessful. As the market's distrust grew, vehicle sales also fell. Songjiang Motors succeeded in breaking the 10,000 mark again with 1,752 units in monthly sales in July of this year, 1 year and 7 months after December 2020. In August, a total of 16,675 units were sold. In the industry, the monthly sales volume of 10,000 units has been regarded as the first hurdle that Songjiang must overcome in order for Songjiang to normalize. Songjiang Motor plans to continue this momentum until the end of this year, laying the foundation for normalization of its business. In addition, KG Group was selected as the acquirer this year, and the company's rehabilitation plan also succeeded in obtaining approval from the court. After debt repayment and issuance of new shares, KG Group will become a major shareholder of Songjiang Motor on the 21st of this month. The court's final judgment remains, but it is about to graduate from the corporate rehabilitation process. The feeling of the company's executives and employees celebrating this holiday is bound to be unique. Every time Songjiang Motors normalization measures such as mergers and acquisitions faced difficulties, Songjiang Motors Union stepped out and appealed for an early normalization. KG Group, which took over Songjiang Motor, is starting a full-fledged management plan. KG Group Chairman Kwok Jae-sun, who held the inauguration ceremony of Songjiang Motor Chairman on the 1st of this month, went back and forth between the Pyeongtaek plant and the KG Group headquarters in Seoul to find out about business. The industry believes that Chairman Kwok will finish planning the composition of the board of directors and the representative system before the court's order to graduate Songjiang Motors rehabilitation procedures is issued. In the midst of economic downturn, consumption is contracting, raw material prices rise and adverse conditions such as supply chain disruptions overlap, there is still a question mark in the market whether Songjiang Motor will be able to fully revive. There is also the task of overcoming the accumulated defeatism as the owners change several times. The Gunsan-type jobs project, which the Moon Jae-in government promoted as a national project to build an electric vehicle cluster in Gunsan, Jeollabuk-do, is in danger of being stranded. The key to this project is that 5 companies selected by the government and the city of Gunsan will hire 1,700 people and produce 120,000 vehicles a year by 2023 and a cumulative 320,000 vehicles by 2024. Exceed. However, the goal of producing 120,000 vehicles per year by next year is virtually impossible to achieve. Myeongshin, the largest of the participating companies, has signed production contracts and letters of intent to export 230,000 units one after another with Chinese and Egyptian companies since 2019, but not one actual electric vehicle manufacturing related to this contract was made. This is because Chinese companies are in financial trouble and are on the verge of being delisted. Edison Motors, which said it would produce 300,000 electric vehicles a year in Gunsan alone, is pursuing the sale of the company as Chairman Kong Young-kwan is being investigated by the prosecution on allegations of stock price manipulation. Plants that could not procure parts due to lack of funds stopped production. The total production of these participating companies this year is only about 1,400 units, less than a tenth of the original target. Local government prices and the industry respond that the failure of the Gunsan type job was predicted. Myeongshin, which Gunsan City had seen as the company to lead the business, signed a contract to produce 50,000 units with Byton, a Chinese electric vehicle maker, in 2019. However, as Byton's management became difficult and the contract was shaken, it became difficult to complete the Gunsan type job project itself. Among the 5 participating companies, MPS Korea announced its intention to withdraw its investment in August last year, taking issue with the process of selling the site. The Gunsan type job business, which had been struggling since its inception due to the crisis of bankruptcy, signed a letter of intent to invest 100,000 units with an Egyptian state-owned automaker in January of this year, and a contract to produce 80,000 electric vehicles with Faraday Future, another Chinese electric vehicle maker, in February. It was barely revived by the end of the city of Gunsan provided unsecured guarantees of up to 10 billion won to the 4 participating companies and actively supported them by exempting the midterm repayment fee under the condition of repayment for 20 years. The government and the city of Gunsan have poured 160 billion won alone to build an electric vehicle cluster in Gunsan. A number of construction sites are disrupting construction in the aftermath of the soaring raw material prices due to the war in Russia and Ukraine. Even though the government raised the GDX project cost by nearly 10%, construction companies did not participate in the bidding, which puts the project at risk of delay. In June, the Korea Railroad Corporation raised the project cost of the GTXB route by 207.3 billion won from 2.35 trillion won to 2.558 trillion won. Although the project cost was raised to encourage corporate participation, companies ignored it. 1. Private housing supply projects are also being delayed due to construction costs. The construction project of the 448M High Cheongna City Tower, which will become the landmark of Incheon's Cheongna International City, has been delayed as the construction company, POSCO E&C, requested to raise the construction cost from 303.2 billion won to 560 billion won. The construction material price index announced by the Bank of Korea was 146.47 in July this year, up 34.8% from January last year. On the other hand, during the same period, the basic construction cost, which is the basis for calculating the upper limit of the pre-sale price, rose by 10.6%. The gap between the rate of increase in construction prices and the rate of increase in construction costs recognized by the government is large. The cost of public redevelopment projects that are not subject to the upper price ceiling system is also rising steeply. As the cost of construction increases due to soaring raw material prices, the supply of housing is also shrinking. According to the Ministry of Land, Infrastructure, and Transport, the number of housing starts nationwide until July this year was 223,082, down nearly 30% from the same period last year. It is less than in 2019, when construction starts were sluggish due to the Moon Jae-in government's supply restraint policy. On the 31st of last month, the actual transaction was reported for 84 square meters of Jamsil-els in Jamsil-dong, Songpagu, Seoul. Compared to the actual transaction price of the same area in the same complex in October last year, the price plunged by 650 million won in 1 year. Even considering the low floor, it was 200 million won lower than the exclusive 84 square meters traded in June of this year. The recession in the real estate market is deepening due to the base rate hike, economic contraction, and fatigue from excessively high house prices. The decline in apartment prices in Seoul was the largest in 9 years. National and provincial apartment prices fell the most since statistics were compiled. Although prices are falling, the transaction cliff is not being resolved due to concerns about the interest burden caused by interest rate hikes and further declines in housing prices. According to Seoul Real Estate Information on the same day, apartment sales in Seoul in July this year fell 86.3% from the same period last year to 639, the lowest ever. The trading volume, which decreased to 820 in February this year, increased to 1,752 in April, just before the presidential election, but declined sharply after that. The Bank of Korea started raising the base rate in earnest in April, and in July it took a big step to raise the base rate by 0.5 percentage points at a time to 2.25%. The Korean economy is facing a major crisis. With high inflation and high interest rates turning on emergency lights in the economy of the common people, even the exchange rate soars to the ceiling, and dark clouds are growing across the economy. Even before the economic growth had returned to normal after getting out of the corona crisis, it was faced with a complex crisis called the so-called 3-high phenomenon. The government declared that it would shift to a sound fiscal stance and change the economic structure in order to manage the rapidly rising national debt, but it is difficult to find a suitable countermeasure to solve the current economic issues in front of us. The Korea Development Institute, KDI, diagnosed that the recovery of the Korean economy is weakening and the extent of the economic downturn is widening in the September Economic Trends report released recently. For 2 months in a row, the positive evaluation of a moderate economic recovery turned negative. While the global economy is slowing, the Korean economy is also struggling to keep pace. In addition to the slow economic recovery, the recent fluctuations in the exchange rate amid high inflation are also a major burden on the overall economy. In the Seoul foreign exchange market on the 8th, the $1 exchange rate closed at 1,380.81, down 3.41 from the previous trading day. Although the $1 exchange rate turned downward in 6 trading days, it is still at the highest level since the global financial crisis in 2009. The exchange rate, which was 1,319.81 based on the closing price in early January of this year, continued to rise, and recently reached a new high point every day, and now it is nearing 1,401. Inflation continues to rise. The consumer price inflation rate, which rose to the 3% level in October last year, continued to rise from February of this year. In June, it broke through the 6% range, and in July reached the highest level in 23 years and 8 months since the 1998 financial crisis. Last month, the 5% level was down, but there is still a long way to go before it finds stability. In a situation where price stabilization, which is directly related to the economy of the working class, is most urgent, the high exchange rate is expected to act as a negative factor for the future price outlook. The Bank of Korea estimated that the increase in the exchange rate in the first half of this year raised the domestic consumer price by 0.4 percentage points in the background of the big step hike by central banks in Korea and major countries in the recently released Monetary and Credit Policy Report. It seems that import prices rose as the won depreciated due to the strength of the dollar, affecting overall prices. As a measure to quickly stabilize such inflation, it had no choice but to carry out a large interest rate hike. In July, the BOK raised the key interest rate from 1.75% to 2.25%. For the first time ever, I took a big step of 0.50% p. However, despite continued interest rate hikes, inflation is hardly caught, and the economy of the common people is further pushed into the depths of the vicious cycle. Some analysts believe that the skyrocketing exchange rate is further fueling the continuous high inflation and high interest rates. There is also growing concern about stagflation, which even causes the economy to stagnate. The Korea Economic Research Institute analyzed in the recently released Stagflation Experience and Policy Implications report that if Korea's economic growth rate falls to the low 2% range in the second half of this year, it is highly likely to enter stagflation. As such, major macroeconomic indicators are showing instability, and signs of economic slowdown are also becoming clear, but there are not enough cards that the government can offer in response. This is because the dominant analysis is that the current economic crisis is caused by uncertainty in external factors such as international oil prices and monetary policies of major countries. There are voices emphasizing the active role of the fiscal policy in response to the prolonged economic downturn, but the government has already shifted to an austerity stance, focusing on fiscal soundness. He tightened his belt to manage the country's debt, which has grown rapidly in the process of overcoming the corona crisis. The government has prepared a budget of 639 trillion won for next year. This year's total expenditure including the second supplementary budget was reduced from 679.5 trillion won. This year, the national debt exceeded 100 trillion won for the first time in history at 1,068.8 trillion won, and it is expected to rise to 1,134.8 trillion won next year despite the government's sound fiscal policy. In the face of continuous high inflation, high interest rates, and high exchange rate crisis, the scope of operation is bound to be limited as the government does not have enough financial ammunition. If it is immersed in the real economy, it is expected that there will be difficulties in the implementation of major national tasks. Even when students curse and threaten teachers, it was found that there are not many cases where the school resists the holding of the Educational Rights Protection Committee and responds passively. It is pointed out that the school is neglecting the violation of the right to teach by failing to properly understand the plight of teachers as victims. B. A teacher at an elementary school in Jeollabuk-do, asked the school to hold a Teacher Rights Protection Committee in May, but was rejected. B alleges that she has been constantly harassed and threatened by her classmate, Kim Yang. Yang Kim did not hesitate to spit out abusive language such as "What should I do, Mr. X" to Mr. B, who was guiding her life. He also wrote in a notebook full of "My teacher is dead" in red and showed it to Mr. B. It is said that he repeated the act of smashing down the desk and books with scissors while staring at B in class. B, feeling threatened by Yang Kim's continued problematic behavior, demanded that the Educational Rights Protection Committee be held and that she should be separated from the students. When the Teacher Rights Protection Committee is held, the student will be subject to deliberation in accordance with the Status of Teacher Act, and maximum expulsion. But the school said, should I do that to a child who has already had a school violence committee? The teacher doesn't think about students, he asked for patience. At that time, Yang Kim was reported to have been bullied by another student. Aside from the disposition of the student, a request for separation measures could be taken, but it was not accepted. B, who was exposed to repeated threats without taking any other measures, was diagnosed with panic disorder, took a sick leave and took a month off. Like B, there are many cases where teachers are unable to respond to children's violence due to dissent from the school. Middle school teacher A also requested the school to hold the Educational Rights Protection Committee in April, but it was not held in the end. At that time, Mr. A was constantly being bullied and disturbed by classmates from male students in a specific class. She said that when she tried to start a class in class, she booed for no reason, and when Mr. A told him to be quiet, he collectively laughed and ignored Mr. A. This behavior that started in one class spread to the next class. However, the school side told Mr. A that she wanted her teacher to solve it in a line that gave her attention, and she refused to hold the Educational Rights Protection Committee. In the end, the school held the Teacher Rights Protection Committee only after Mr. A requested help from the Teachers' Rights Headquarters of the Korean Federation of Teachers Associations. The National Recreational Forest is so popular that more than 15 million visitors a year. In particular, there are many sayings that it is as difficult as picking the stars in the sky to find accommodation in national and public natural recreation forests. When the Board of Audit and Inspection investigated the lodging reservation systems of some national and public natural recreation forests, there was one more major reason for difficult reservations besides popularity. It was a fraudulent reservation. On the 8th, the Board of Audit and Inspection audited the reservation systems for natural recreation forests in Bungun, Chungcheongbuk-do, and Mujeogun, Jeollabuk-do, which received a lot of complaints that accommodation cannot be reserved among 163 national and public natural recreation forests nationwide. He said that he confirmed the fraudulent reservation. In principle, reservations for accommodation in national and public natural recreation forests are on a first-come, first-served basis, and guests are selected by lottery during the peak season in July and August. However, it is said that there are cases in which the reservation manager reserve a room for his/her family, acquaintances, boss, or the family of the relevant county government official in advance during peak season or on weekends. The reservation service is being done by a private company entrusted by the county government. According to the Board of Audit and Inspection, at Songnisan Forest Experience Recreation Village and Chungbuk Alps Natural Recreation Forest, which are natural recreation forests in Bungun, there were 58 cases of reservations being made by the person in charge of receiving an illegal reservation order from Bungun officials. According to the Board of Audit and Inspection, the person in charge of reservations who received instructions from their superiors also booked accommodation in the resort forest in the name of local residents. Local residents receive a discount of 40,000 won per night. It was the same with Muju. The person in charge of reservation for the natural recreation forest in Mujeogun, under the direction of the president of the reservation company, booked a room for an acquaintance of the president on behalf of him in August last year. The Board of Audit and Inspection confirmed that the manager of the Mujeol County office had instructed the reservation manager to make an illegal reservation. However, in the case of Mujeogun, the exact number of fraudulent reservations was not disclosed in this audit. Netflix predicted that it would strengthen its original entertainment lineup in the second half of this year, but the red light came on due to Disney Plus pre-attack. It was planned to release an entertainment show featuring broadcaster Yoo Jae-seok and actor Lee Kwang-soo, but Disney first released an entertainment show featuring these two people. Netflix, which has been particularly weak in the entertainment industry, is deeply concerned. According to the industry on the 8th, Netflix is adjusting the release time of its original entertainment show Korea No. 1. Korea No. 1 is about Jae-seok-yoo, Kwang-soo Lee and Yeon-kyung Kim, a volleyball player, visiting Korean artisans to experience traditional labor and struggling to become the number one of the day. At a Korean entertainment meeting held in July, Netflix announced that it would start introducing entertainment content in earnest from the second half of this year. He said that he would release one original variety show every 1 or 2 months, and selected Korea No. 1 and Solo Hell 2 as killer content. But I ran into an unexpected problem. On the 8th, Disney Plus released the original entertainment show The Zone, You Have to Endure It, starring Yoo Jae-seok, Lee Kwang-soo, and Kwon Kwon-ri. 2 out of 3 main cast members overlap. Netflix has had a bitter taste in original entertainment. Except for the reality dating program Solo Hell, there are no hit films. Last year, Food and Furry, which became a hot topic as PD Kim Tae-ho's first Netflix work, also ended up as a typhoon in a teacup amid controversy over plagiarism. Yoo Jae-seok participated in Netflix's first Korean original entertainment series, You Are the Culprit. Although it was produced until season 3, it failed to attract global box office success. It is a strategy that once again tried to reverse the strategy with famous MC Yoo Jae-seok, but the effect is unknown as it has already hit a player on other OTT platforms. While former national figure skating representative Lee Kyu-hyun was arrested on charges of raping a minor student, his past controversies such as sexual harassment, drunk driving, and hit-and-run death are being re-examined. On September 8, 2005, at around 4:30 am, Lee Kyu-hyun hit a passerby with a car and ran away from his home, Bomundong, Songbukgu, Seoul to Wongsimni, Songdonggu, and killed him. He was arrested and charged with this case, but the exact level of punishment was not known. He is also known to have had 3 prior convictions for drunk driving. In 2016, he was embroiled in a controversy over sexually harassing a minor student. In September 2016, at the 2017 International Skating Federation Figure Skating Junior Competition, Lee Kyu-hyun sparked a controversy by making excessive unnecessary physical contact, such as wrapping around the waist and patting the hips of a teenager at the time. Lee Kyu-hyun was arrested at the end of last month on charges of sexually assaulting a teenage disciple earlier this year. He is currently imprisoned in Ujeongbu prison and is said to be denying all charges. Kyu-hyun Lee participated in the Olympic Games twice, including the 1998 Nagano and 2002 Salt Lake Games. He has been a coach since his retirement in 2003. Lee Kyu-hyun's older brother, Lee Kyu-hyuk, a national speed skating team coach, his father is also a speed skater, and his mother served as the president of the National Skating Federation. Thank you for watching today. Please subscribe and set an alarm.